Norma had chosen the seat at the end of the front row deliberately, the one with the clearest sightline to the back of the venue. She told herself it was practical, more room for her dress, easier to stand when the music started. She had known Gary for 31 years. Practical had nothing to do with it. The thing about a man like Gary was that he never announced himself. He arrived through accumulation, a preference stated firmly enough to become a rule, a silence held long enough to become a verdict, a kindness timed so precisely that you spent years trying to deserve the next one. Norma had been 26 when they married and 39 when she finally understood that the ground beneath her had never been solid, only managed. Paige had grown up on that ground. She had developed, out of necessity, an extraordinary sense of balance. When Gary called in the weeks before the wedding, 4 times, then 6, then a voicemail Norma wasn't meant to hear but did. He had framed the walk as tradition, as something owed. He had used the word sacred without apparent irony. Paige had listened and then said yes, and Norma had watched her daughter's face during that phone call with the particular attention of a woman who had spent years learning to read what wasn't being said. Paige's face had been perfectly carefully still. Norma had not offered an opinion. Her daughter was 31 years old and had not asked for one. The doors at the back opened at 3:17. Gary entered the light like he'd been waiting for it. He was dressed well. He always dressed well. It was one of the true things about him. And his chin was up and his arm was extended, and Paige was beside him in a dress that made Norma press her thumbnail into her palm just to have something to do with her hands. They began to walk. Norma watched his jaw. She had learned this about him sometime in the second decade of their marriage. His face could be composed while his jaw gave everything away. It was tightening now, incrementally, the way it did when he was preparing to say something he had already decided on and was simply waiting for the right moment to deliver. The music moved through its progression. 200 people held the particular stillness of witnesses. Halfway down the aisle, Gary turned his head toward Paige's ear. Norma didn't breathe. She couldn't hear it. She was too far away, and the string quartet was still playing, and whatever he said arrived in Paige's ear alone and stayed there. 1 second. 2. The kind of pause that has a shape to it. 4 seconds total, Norma counted, during which her daughter stood completely still in front of everyone who loved her. Then Paige lifted her hand from Gary's arm, not dramatically, not with any visible anger or performance. She simply lifted it, the way you set something down when you've realized you no longer need to carry it, and she took 1 step forward, and then another, and she walked the rest of the aisle alone, looking straight ahead, her pace unhurried, her shoulders level. She looked, Norma thought, like someone who had made a decision a long time ago and was only now arriving at the moment it became visible. Gary stood briefly in the center of the aisle. Just a moment, 3 seconds, maybe 4, a precise mirror of the pause he had caused before he recovered and moved to his seat. No one looked at him directly. The room simply rearranged itself around his irrelevance with a quiet efficiency that was more devastating than anything deliberate could have been. Norma looked at her daughter. Paige had reached the front. She was standing beside Thomas now, who had taken her hands and was looking at her with an expression Norma recognized as the right one. Not pity, not concern, just presence, just I see you and I'm here. Norma cried during the vows, not at the words which were beautiful but expected, but at the image of her daughter standing in the exact spot she had chosen, held only by someone she had freely chosen to be held by. It was such a simple thing. It shouldn't have taken this long to see. Gary found her at the reception, during the hour when the light was golden and the dancing hadn't started and people were still loose with goodwill. He began a sentence that started with her name and had the shape of an explanation. Norma touched his arm. Brief, light, final. Not tonight, she said. She walked toward the table where Paige was sitting, laughing at something Thomas had said, her head tilted back in a way that meant the laugh was real. Norma sat down beside her daughter and didn't say anything about the aisle, or the 4 seconds, or the hand that had lifted and let go. Paige didn't either. They didn't need to. Some things between a mother and daughter don't require language. They require only the knowledge that the other person saw it and understood and has been waiting a long time to feel this specific kind of relief. The dancing started. They stayed where they were a little longer. That was enough.